Hi, I'm Jamey with Stonemaier Games, and today I'm going to talk about my favorite mechanism in Yggdrasil. Hopefully I'm not butchering that pronunciation. Yggdrasil is, it's like the tree of life in Norse mythology, and there's a cooperative game, an older game, based on that theme. Here's a photo of what the game looks like on the table. Each player plays as a Norse god, and there's a big board on the table with a bunch of bad guys that are advancing on these tracks. And I'll talk about that in a second, because that is my favorite mechanism in the game. But the game does some other cool things too. There's a cool little bag building mechanism. They could have used dice to do this, but when you go to certain locations and do certain things, you pick out of one of several bags, and depending on the location that you selected. And that creates some pretty interesting decisions as you play the game. Instead of having just a random dice roll, it's kind of like the bag building that you see in Arkham Horror, the Living Card game. Because you're defining this bag as you play it, and your odds are getting better or worse as you play it. And that's spread over multiple bags. It's not just one bag. It also has a pretty cool action that I haven't really seen in a game before. And because it's cooperative, it works in a really interesting way in that if you visit this action, you can't see it. It's kind of in the upper right of the board. You advance a token along a track to a better ability than where it previously was. And at a certain point in the game, you can take that action to actually just use the ability based on where the current token is. And so it's this interesting option for players to use their turns to move up towards a very powerful ability to use at the right time. But they could be using those turns elsewhere in the game to try to win the game and not lose the game. Anyway, my favorite mechanism in the game is related to the bad guys that you're fighting here, the villains. These are kind of like the evil gods in the world of Norse mythology. And these are the end condition, the lose condition for this game. And I just think it works in a really, really interesting way. You can kind of see it in the photo here. Basically, there are some thresholds that these tokens pass along the way that can either trigger their abilities at certain times, and also move you towards losing the game. It's kind of tough to sell. There's a 5 there, a 3 there, and a 1 on that last track. And what that is saying is that if at any time 5 of these tokens have advanced across this line, you lose the game. Or if at any time 3 of those tokens have advanced across this line, you lose the game. Or if any one of those tokens has moved across this line, you lose the game. And throughout the game, there are a couple different core ways that these tokens advance. I won't go into that. If you're interested, look at a rules video to see how the tokens advance. But pretty much every turn, a token is probably going to advance, and you need to decide on your turn at certain times to address that threat and push some of them back. And so I really just like the visual aspect of this mechanism and how it feels like it adds a lot of variety to the game, and that from going from game to game, you're going to have different bosses and villains pushing forward at different times in different ways, and you have to decide as a team, okay, do we deal with the 3 that are kind of pushing ahead of the rest, or do we fight back the few that are trying to cross that 5 line? The 5, 3, the 1 line, that is just a really, really interesting way to add variation within each game and from game to game. And to give you this nice visual of where you are in the game and what the threat is at any given time. And it's much more interesting, I think, than if it was just a single token that was advancing along a single track. It's essentially 6 different tracks because of the 6 different villain tokens. So just a really interesting villain progression system and end game condition in a cooperative game. That's my favorite game mechanism in Yggdrasil. I'd love to hear yours if you have a different favorite mechanism in that game, or if this villain progression and end game condition reminds you of something else in the game that you want to talk about in the comments. I'd love to hear about it there. Thanks.